The lighter side of China. Now this is thoughtful. Hello, I'm Andrew Lok in Shanghai, your guest host for today. This week on Thoughtful China, our guest is Scott Kronick, President and CEO Asia Pacific at Ogilvy Public Relations. Now, Scott has lived in Beijing for nearly 2 decades, following a 4-year stint in Taipei, and recently published a book about his experiences and observations called The Lighter Side of China. We invited him to our studio today to share some of his insights. Scott, thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you for interviewing me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Often I'm really skeptical when people write books about China because they become like how-to books and tend to be really prescriptive. Right. But I found it charming and full of anecdotes that I can really relate to after 10 years in China. Actually, the topic I really want to discuss with you was in your 3rd chapter, I believe, and it's on gigantism. And I really like that. The notion that somehow China is growing so fast that somehow it's, I wouldn't say deformed, but somehow it's not a kind of natural sort of growth. Can you comment more on that?
Well, the first thing about understanding China, and I think that chapter was all about just understanding China. And there's a lot of people who've been here for a long time, a lot of people that pontificate about China and what's happening here. And so to get really reliable, credible information that's not masked in drama is sometimes very, very difficult. There's an expression that if you've been to China for a week, you can read it, you can write a book. If you've been here for a month, you can write an article. And if you've been here for a year, you don't even know where to start because it's hard to explain that. And the one way in which I explain a little bit of China is it's almost like an economy on steroids. It's moving so fast that I called it gigantism, whereby it's like a little baby that's just grown up. And in my 20 years, I've documented just in pictures what's transpired. My daughter is 17 years old, and I have a picture of her visiting the office at a very young age, and then take it through the ages, the stages, and Beijing is just totally different. I mean, it's totally different. And the beautiful thing about living in China, and that's why I love every moment of my 20 years, because I love just being thrown a curveball, is the contrast between old and new. And you've got new things sprouting up all over you, and you've got still a lot of the traditional old part of Beijing, and that's been quite special. So it's an economy on steroids. Things are moving so fast. There are some things that will always surprise you about China, and that's a little bit of where that came from.
I mean, I remember the first time I was in China, and I remember walking for like 8 hours from Hutong near the 4th ring all the way to Tiananmen. The next time I was in China, I was working with you guys just before the Olympics. And the next question actually pertains to that, because here we are really nostalgic about the past and the things that have been gotten torn down and we lost. But is that nostalgia sentimental based on our part as expatriates here, or do you think that somehow it's just part and parcel of progress and something that we shouldn't be too sentimental about?
Well, I think it's important to capture the culture and the essence of what Beijing or China is all about. So there are people that are really arguing for maintaining some of the old traditional part of Beijing, and I support that fully. You also have to progress as a society, so I kind of net out somewhere in the middle. But I think Beijing still, I definitely long for some of the older things, some of the, being able to take the whole staff, and I used to take 10 staff out to a restaurant, and we used to eat for less than $10. They used to cut the domiao, the green leafy vegetables, right in front of you from the dirt, and then go cook them. And that kind of, that's lost a little bit in how things have progressed. But But you also need to embrace progress, and I think you got it all. You've got it all in China, in Beijing particularly.
Even what we call Sansai counterfeit, which is something I want to bring up because it's actually quite an interesting chapter in your book about how you actually find it quite charming. Like it's not flattery, but you find kind of comical that brands can actually develop in China, and yet the ones that copy them can be quite comical and they actually have an identity of their own. Like
right.
One you mentioned Kipling,
right?
The brand, and what was the phrase you used?
No, because the basic story is our nanny in our house wears a sweatshirt.
Okay. That
is the Kipling monkey, but the expression is smile happiness monkey, and it's a ridiculous expression in English, but she's worn it for many years, and I always get a little bit of a chuckle out of smile happiness monkey. And I just find out, where do these things come from? They have, if you went down to Shoshui or the Silk Market or the Yashou Market, you'll see the Detroit Kings, the sports teams that don't exist. And I was like, crazy. During the Olympics, there were some beautiful, the one thing that was interesting is during the Olympics, you could not find any counterfeit goods of Olympic material because the Running Man was the protection of the Beijing government, and they really protected their intellectual property. So it showed the market in the world that that China could really protect intellectual property if they had the willingness and the will to do it. So you could not find anything counterfeit related to the Olympic goods during the Beijing Olympics. I got a shirt, a golf shirt that was beautiful, a beautiful golf shirt, and it was with the Olympic rings, and they had one of the rings missing, and it was kind of classic that they went the distance, but they still got a little bit of it wrong. So I took poke some fun at those types of experiences, and I tell share a lot of these with my family and my mom. And my mom was out in 798, and she went to a children's shop. And she bought all these wonderful gifts for my nieces and nephews. And when she walked out, they gave her a bag. And the bag on the outside of the bag says, "I love you so effing much." And I just find, that counterfeits and the way that brands develop and everything were interesting. And there are so many funny stories around it. So that's why I included it.
But as a public relations guru, let's just say if your client was a brand like Kipling, would you ask him to, hey, just chill out, it's just a little bit of fun, or would you ask him to actually, I don't know, sue Happiness Smile Monkey?
I'm not sure the legal route is always the best route. I mean, if you take Ogilvy, for example, I mean, there's two. So Ogilvy's known for branding, and there are companies that have developed Ogilvy brands. There was a car in the middle part of China that they developed an Ogilvy car. And it was kind of comical, and we didn't think about going the legal route. There was in one of my staff, she has a toothpick box made by Beijing, Ogilvy, and Mather Toothpick Company.
I think I must have done that.
And I just find I never thought that someone would use our brand to, and I don't think David Ogilvy ever visited the province where they were made, so it wasn't David Ogilvy who created the toothpick brand. So I found some fun in that and just wanted to include it in the chapter on copies.
Now let's take a break to hear from our sponsor. When we come back, Scott Kronick, author of The Lighter Side of China, will share more observations from his 2 decades spent in this country.
Let's go!
Welcome back. We're in the studio with Scott Kronick to talk about his new book, The Lighter Side of China. Actually, what I found quite interesting about this book was, if I were a first-time person in China and I was looking, oh, it's Scott Kronick, you know, he's the CEO of Asia Pacific PR. I thought there were a lot of business insights, but a lot of it's very personal and anecdotal. But if you read deeper into it, a lot of the things you mentioned, right, actually hinge on something I find very important, very interesting about doing business in China, is that a lot of it isn't always business. A lot of it is cultural. You almost have to be able to sit down with a Chinese client and talk about the things you talked about, like Chinese medicine or right. good luck or ghosts.
Right.
So actually immersing yourself in Chinese culture, has that helped you with?
That part of it is the part, and I thank you for that, because that is exactly the purpose. I mean, I did not want to write a business book, and I did not want to write a marketing book, and it's a little booklet. Let's be very clear. I mean, my sister says it's a great bathroom reading book. So.
That's exactly where I read it, actually.
There you go. So, but it's a book that tells stories that don't say the Western way is right or the Chinese way is right. It just, this is the way it is, and this explains it. And so sometimes in our business, we talk a lot about insights, and the insights are, yeah, that's why that really makes sense. And so I tried the first chapter is on names, Chinese names. And every Westerner that comes in here, when they meet someone Chinese, they wonder, how can a billboard quack be in the advertising business? Did he really plan it that way? We had a creative team in Beijing that was Jesus and the devil.
Yes, yeah.
And so, you know, they're just crazy things that happen that sometimes need explanation. Yeah. So what I tried to do is explain, yeah, let me tell you a little bit about where some of the Chinese staff, people that I've met, got their English names. And it just tells a little bit of a story that explains it a little bit. So if you're a first-time visitor or a visitor to China, you always thought about, why do people wear these, you know, good luck bracelets or things like that? You know a little bit, you know, maybe someone prayed with it in front of the Buddha stand and it's passing off good luck to them. So that's a little bit of where that came from.
I mean, from the book, I've learned that your missus is Chinese, so your kids are half Chinese. Yeah. So you're really immersed in Chinese culture. So for, say, a first-time client or a friend, a college friend from the States, and he comes over and he listens to you actually embrace all these things that he may find strange or maybe sometimes find not ethical. I wouldn't say not ethical, I would say strange and somewhat unfamiliar to Western ears. How do you respond to the question that actually you've grown more Chinese than really objective about things? As in, you're so deep in this culture after being here for 20 years that have you lost your objectivity?
Well, I have to think about that all the time. I mean, I do think I've grown up more in a business sense in Asia than I have in the U.S. And my mission in life is to bridge cultures using communications. And I've kind of come about that because that's what I do for a living. I do that in my everyday life with my wife and kids. And I've kind of lived that life. And so I love sometimes being the one Western person in a group of 20 Chinese and just kind of being a fly on the wall. And that's what happens. At Chinese New Year every year we have family gathering. And I just kind of observed my wife and how she interacts with her brothers and sisters. And you pick up things, and it's, you know, it's different. It's different than Flint, Michigan. Okay?
You're from Flint?
Flint, Michigan. I'm from Flint, Michigan, believe it or not. So it's different. And I'll tell you a great story. I was in Taiwan, and the feng shui master came to bless an apartment that we have in Taiwan, and I was there doing it for our family because my wife and kids had not been back, and I was there with my mother-in-law, and so we had the monk that is part of the temple that my mother-in-law belongs to, and there's 5 women, elderly women from the temple there doing the Amitofa for the, and we walked around the apartment and blessed the whole apartment. And I FaceTime one of my relatives in the U.S. I said, you know, you don't see this in the United States. So it's a different world, and it's not right or wrong, but it's interesting. And so I wanted to, I've taken some joy in experiencing that.
Okay, another question about being an expatriate who's developed most of his business career in Asia. I remember a staff of mine shared a joke with me once. No, it wasn't a joke. I guess he meant it half seriously. He says, Andrew, you've been called the best English copywriter in China because you're the only English copywriter in China.
Right.
So he's saying that the only reason we add value is because somehow we're not Chinese. Now, to a person coming into the advertising and marketing in China now, and being a veteran for 20 years, how would you advise him to actually add value to every place he's in? For, I mean, let's face it, Chinese are graduating from Ivy League schools, they're sharp as tacks. How do we, how does a person coming in from outside actually add value right now?
I think, you know, if you're new, I think you've got to be curious. You've got to work to be able to find the insights, to keep asking the question, why? And I'll tell you, you know, my Chinese isn't great, and but when I came out to, I moved to Taiwan 23 years ago, and I used to spend, they used to once every month we had a training all weekend, and I would go to that training. It was all in Chinese, and I would just listen for words, Chinese words, and I'd write them down. And I'd say, what am I going to get out of this weekend? Because I can't understand the content, I'm going to learn a little bit about Chinese. And I think there's lessons in everything we do. And I think if you want to be successful, you got to be curious. You got to know that you're a guest here. I'm a guest. I've been a guest. It's been my home for 20 years. I'm a guest. And I'm only as good as my Chinese partners. So how do we work together to come up with the best result? And then I'm still, you know, I'm still very Western. I think I have an understanding of some things in China, not everything. And then I think that experience has really helped. So you got to make yourself open for experiences, and you got to be open-minded.
Is that why we have actually a chapter inside here that talks about growing, shall we say, growing old in China? The whole chapter about age.
Right.
Do you feel you're ageless in China because you're learning every day, or?
I feel as energetic today as I did when I started out in this business. There is so much to do, and I have a ton of energy because, you know, every day, there's been no 2 days that have been the same. Actually, there's one thing you'll see in that I say, in one of the chapters that, you know, some people say your best day and your worst day can happen on the same day in China. And so there's no 2 days that are ever like, and you're always learning. So I feel, you know, I do feel ageless. You know, I can't believe I've been here 23 years. It seems like just yesterday. So, and I feel as energetic as I've ever had. So yes. You know, my wife often says, you're old. I mean, I still play a little bit of football, and
American football.
Soccer. So I play soccer, and I still play basketball, and I don't feel 51.
Your kids are what now?
17 and 15.
So if they wanted to start out in marketing now, do you think public relations would, say in the next 10 years, do you think public relations would still be a way to go, or is advertising the way to go, or is advertising dead, or should they join like a technology platform?
I think
for China.
First of all, I have tons of confidence in the futures of both of my kids, and I'm their father, so that's biased. My daughter is an exceptional at social media, probably too exceptional, to be honest with you. but she knows the whole social media game better than most people. So I would say where the business is changing is how people consume information. And just like you had said, your agency does a lot of digital work and so forth. People in China today are consuming more and more information, making decisions more through information they get in social media channels. And so really what the people that we're hiring are really those people that with those skills, and some of those people that are the best at that are the young people. So, the thing about us old farts is that we've got to make sure we're still young and understand all those channels. And my son is will be a very good businessman in whatever he does.
I'm sure they're putting this on Facebook right now for you. So
what's that? Oh, my daughter saw something. She said I liked this or something like that. So she told me I can't like my own stuff. I get it. Right.
So when will the Chinese translation be out? I'm really looking forward to that.
So I've been asked to do a Chinese translation. I'm going to do it. This takes discipline. I mean, I wrote the columns. This book is a compilation of columns I wrote on the Beijinger, and it took discipline every Saturday to do it. So I need to put it into Chinese, and that will be what's next. And
if I put it on Facebook, do I get a free copy?
You know what? I'll give you 5 free copies.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That wraps it up for today. Be sure to subscribe to us on Youku, Tudou, and YouTube. You can also follow us on Weibo and Twitter, and join our LinkedIn group. See you again soon.